Hey everybody, it's Doug Schauf with Remax Oceanside and Make Maine Your Home.com.
Wait a minute.
What?
Does everybody know that we perform the music in all of your podcasts?
Hey everybody, this is Doug Schauf with Remax Oceanside and Make Maine Your Home.com. In this episode, we're going to do things a little bit differently. As you can tell, I'm not in Maine. I'm down in Florida. I'm in Port St. Lucie, Florida at my mother's house. I came down here to do a family reunion, and while I was down here, I thought, what a great podcast to do than with my brother. This is my brother, Kelly Schauf. Good to see you, bro.
Good to see you.
So the reason that I'm doing this with my brother is because he's my brother and I love him. But he also edits all these videos. So when I started this podcast, I was like, who the heck am I going to get to edit all of this and all blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, my brother Kelly does a lot of this stuff and he's getting good at it. So I threw it all in his lap. So literally what I do is take all these files and just go and he like makes it all happen. But the coolest part about this is he's on a year-long trip in an RV with his family. They decided to pack the kids up in a giant RV and drive across the country for a year, homeschooling the kids, rented out their house, the whole 9 yards. So we're going to talk all about his trip and what the heck's going on. So the first question I got to ask is, where did this idea come from? Was it you? Was it your wife? Did you guys talk about it? How long have you been talking about this trip? How did this all start?
So we've been together for almost 15 years. It'll be 15 years this May.
Yep.
And we started speaking about the trip probably 14 and a half years ago. You know what I mean? Just after we got
so it was
married.
right after you got married and said, was it like kind of, wouldn't that be cool? Or was it, at that point, was it like, we're doing this?
Well, it was definitely my wife.
Yeah.
It was definitely Grace. I mean, she brought it up and we were both having conversations about it, but we were both excited about it.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about it, and we're just pregnant at the time. We just started talking about, when we have kids, we can go homeschool, we can travel around the country. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, sure.
You know, and we were in our 30s at the time. You know what I mean? So
a lot more energy then.
yeah. So, but the idea was there, and we were talking, like, at the time there wasn't like Wi-Fi yet. There wasn't really mobile internet, you know, so that was a concern.
Right.
We'd have to be working from the road.
Right. How do we make a living?
Yeah, because we figured we'd rather make a living from the road versus saving up a bunch of money to try to work or try to not work for the year. You know what I mean? That was at least the original idea.
It's probably a better way to go about it.
Yeah. Well, we figured it would take so much money, and we're probably better off working from the road.
Right.
So that's one of the hurdles that we had to come across. So basically, over the years, we moved. We met and married up in the Boston area. Then we spent a couple years in New York City. Mm-hmm. Then we've been in the Mid-Atlantic and the Maryland area for about 8 or 9 years at this point. I think 9 years. And it would come up like every year, you know, the conversation, but neither one of us could make it happen with work. Right. We wanted the kids to be a little bit older. That's what we started deciding. So basically the past 2 years or 2 years ago, we were both able to make it work where we could work from anywhere.
Right.
And the kids, it was just before our oldest was going into high school.
Right.
So we kind of looked at each other and said, this is it.
It's like now or never.
Yeah, this is now or never. We're doing it or not.
And Gabriel's in 8th grade this year, right?
He's in 8th grade this year, yep. And then Emilio's in 6th grade this year. So they're missing 2 years of middle school, and anybody knows, if anybody's gone to middle school, they know that middle school is the worst.
Right.
Yeah. Elementary school's better and high school's better.
Yeah.
Middle school's terrible.
Right.
So to take them out of a year of middle school, we figured was not the worst thing in the world.
Right. Probably the best time. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Right. Okay. All right, cool. So this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago, you're like, okay, I think this is when we got to do it. Let's talk a little bit about how all this came together. Like...
well, first of all,
I know a lot of it. But yeah.
Well, first of all, it wasn't me saying we got to get this together. It was Grace.
Right.
And she's older than me. You know, not to tell one on my wife, but she's older than me. And I looked at her and I said, well, you know, I'm now in my deep into my 40s.
Yeah.
And this was a cool idea when I was in my 30s, but now it's like we have a really nice life. We have a great house.
Yeah.
Friends, neighborhood, school system for the kids. Like we have a great scenario, you know, in the Maryland area. So.
Right.
But she was really gung-ho for it, and I was not too hard to persuade because I had already bought into it.
She was still, even then, hey, we got it. We got to do this. Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I quite frankly I agree with. I think it's amazing.
Yes.
So okay. So then the logistics start kicking in.
Yes.
Like, hey, how do we do this? Like, somebody out there's watching. They're like, hey, I'd love to do that. What do I do?
Sure.
So what was the first step? Was it like, okay, we got to. Well, number one, you need an RV.
We got to get an RV. Yeah, we have to have a vehicle.
Because you didn't own one.
No.
Never owned one
never
before.
Never owned one. Never rented one. Never driven one.
Right.
We literally were green. Like this
Right.
is if you're watching this and you've never even thought, like, this is not, we're not experienced RVers.
Right.
I mean, we pulled the idea out of thin air and then materialized it over time. But
just said, hey, now here's a funny question.
Right.
So not only were you not experienced with RVs, how many times have you been camping in the last 5 years?
Oh, 0. Okay. No, I'm sorry. I think it was one time, and I didn't even
Maybe
like
once.
it.
Yeah.
I went camping, didn't like it. But hey, let's get an RV.
Yeah, let's
travel
do
the
it.
country.
Time to go camping.
Yeah, right.
That's funny.
Yeah.
All right. So what'd you do first? You just start calling around the Google machine?
Well, luckily, my wife is what she does for a living is research.
Right. Oh yeah.
So she's a researcher.
Okay,
so the first
good.
thing that we actually started doing was we started hitting RV trade shows. We figured that was the best way to go because you could actually get your hands on an RV, a huge selection, a ton of different dealers would show up.
Right.
And we could get educated because we hadn't rented one, we've never driven one, we literally just needed to get our hands on it.
Right.
So actually Grace and the kids did a couple without me, and then I started doing them with them, and that was more than a year from when we actually started the trip.
Right.
So about a year and a half, I guess, before we started the trip. And that was still in the phase where I was like, well, we could always give it up. we don't have to do this.
I know. Are you sure? I don't know. Can't find what we want.
Yeah, well, oops. I don't think there's anything out there. We should, maybe scrap the idea.
Right.
So they were still in that phase, and people, our family, friends, stuff like that, didn't believe that we were going to do it. You
Sure.
know what I mean? Like some people did. Like I know you did.
Well, I was all on board with the idea. I didn't think you'd make it happen.
Right. You didn't. Right. Exactly. Which is common because we were, we didn't know what the heck we were doing, so we had to make it happen and believe in it as well.
Right.
So. But yeah, so that's the first part, and then as we got closer and we started getting, first of all, we realized that renting was way too expensive. It's like $1,500 a week, so you'd be spending $6,000 a month.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
Renting versus buying it.
Versus buying, yeah. So we were like, well, let's not do that, and then we didn't want to buy brand new because as soon as you drive off the lot, you lose a ton of value in the RV. So the way that we decided. And other people may have different opinions, other RVers, but we decided to go used, but to go relatively new. So we went with the 2016 Winnebago that we found at a pretty reputable dealer, in the Maryland area.
So kind of like buying it. That's how I buy my cars. I usually buy 1 or 2 years old,
Yep.
so you can get a little bells and whistles for the money.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about the place that you got it from. Is it how was the experience of actually purchasing it? What was that like?
That was okay, and we chose to finance it. So we didn't save up the money. We didn't pay cash for the unit.
Right.
We financed it just because it made the most sense, just to hold on to our money.
Right.
Especially for the trip, to have as much cushion as possible. The Leo's was the place that we went to. They were great as far as purchasing it.
Yep.
Up to the point of actually driving away. And then we had some issues that I'll get into in a little bit that afterwards.
Right.
I was just very surprised because we researched them a lot and they were definitely the most reputable dealer in the Mid-Atlantic and the Maryland area. So
Yeah. Well, let's first talk about the. You walk into a place, never driven an RV. I mean, what do? You just say, "Hey, give me. I want to ride that." Do they let you take it overnight? I mean, or was it just kind of go for a tool around the block?
This is a great question because you can do this. Anybody can do this. You can walk into any dealership. So at least the rigs that we were looking at, and ours is a Class A, which means it's a full-size motorhome. We're not towing a fifth wheeler, towing a trailer.
Oh, right.
It's a full-size motorhome, but I thought you had to have a special license, and they basically, as soon as we found the one that we liked, they kind of moved some motorhomes, got some techs to move motorhomes, and got ours out of the pile.
Right.
And then handed me the keys. And I said, well, hold on a second. I'm not. They're like, you don't need a license. Here, go ahead, give it a shot. You'll be fine. And I was
off you go, bucko.
Yeah. So I did say, hold on a second. Let's just at least get somewhere because what they did and what I think most dealerships do is that they had a parking lot that was down the way, so you could drive a distance to get there, about 4 or 5 miles.
Okay.
drive around the parking lot and test drive.
Do some zippity doos and all that
Yes,
stuff.
and then drive back. So I asked the guy, our salesman or our rep, he drove it to the parking lot, talking to us the whole way. You could see that it was pretty easy to handle. It's a large vehicle, but there's just things you just got to take it slow. Like, they just gave me basic tips.
Right.
So we went down to a parking lot. I drove it around. Was very surprised at how well it handled. Grace drove it. That's the one and only time she's driven it.
Was that because she was so bad at it, or was it?
No, it's not. And
like, you're done.
Yeah, and she wants to drive it, but it's solely on me. Like, I feel like I'm already one of the types of drivers. When I'm in a car, I like to drive.
I'm like that. I'm like that too.
Yeah, I don't like to be driven around. I like to drive. And this thing is such a beast, and there's so many little things to think about that. Not that she can't learn all those, but I'm just like, let me drive. It just makes the whole thing easier.
You got it down, just make it out.
Yeah, peace in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Just leave it. So there's no fights, no whatever, right?
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
But she was great at driving it, and it is easy to drive. And then I drove it back to the dealership, and that's when we were bitten. That's when the bug had bitten us, where, holy cow, not only is this happening, but this is going to work. Like, there's things that I was nervous about, like hitting low bridges and stuff like that. But other than that, I knew that overall it was going to work.
Yeah, at that point, you're like, okay, this can actually happen.
Right.
All right, so you purchased this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next probably purchase that you had to talk about was you're driving your RV, you stop somewhere. How do you go around? So you had to buy a car, right?
Yes. Yep. Okay. Yeah, we had to tow a car.
Right.
We had to tow a car.
And that experience was kind of funny because tell me about what you bought, why you bought it.
Well, so we named ourselves Every Day We're Schaufelin.
Right. On Facebook, you check them out. Every Day We're Schaufelin.
Yeah, Every Day We're Schaufelin is our because we always sang it every time we hear the LMFAO party rock anthem. We would always sing, instead of them saying Every Day We're Shuffling, we would sing Every Day We're Shuffling.
Yeah.
And that's how we came up with our name for the Facebook page.
That's awesome.
So what's funny is that when I started looking for vehicles, we had 2 vehicles that we could not tow, and we sold those cars. And then we went and looked around for used vehicles, but we had to look for specific models, manufacturers, etc. Some manufacturers have a bunch of limitations on towing, which means if something does happen to your vehicle, they won't guarantee it, won't try to even fix it, they won't touch it. But Kia and Toyota were 2 manufacturers that were okay if you picked the right vehicle.
Right.
We happened to find a used Kia Soul, and it happened to also be a car that LMFAO's Party Rock Anthem was used in a commercial.
In the commercial.
Yeah,
right.
so it was just
like the gerbils or something.
Yeah, the hamsters.
Yeah,
all the dancing, right?
Dancing around.
Yeah, exactly. so we have that. So when I saw that, I was like, well, then this is the car for us.
Of course.
So it's
seemed to make sense.
Exactly. It's a 6-speed manual.
Right.
So, but we tow it with all 4 wheels on the ground. So we don't have a trailer. We tow it with what's called a blue ox, and that pulls the car along. And so the tires, all 4 tires, are touching.
Right. Yeah. So, and that gives you the freedom to be able to go about, and, when you're at a park or whatever. Hey, I want to go to the store. You got a place to do it.
Well, up to this point, so yesterday was 7 months into our 12-month tour.
Right.
And we've put 11,000 miles in the RV, but we put 7,000 miles in the Kia.
Oh, sure.
So we've
a lot of trips.
18,000 miles between the 2. Yeah.
Right. Okay, awesome. So then you got your stuff, you got your vehicles, you got your tires, you're ready to fly. You still got a house, though. I mean, what was the plan with the house?
Yeah, so the house we already knew, and this is what kind of when we first started talking about this whole thing was, for us, this is our forever house. Like, we already have our house that we want to be in for many, many years. We have no intentions of selling it. So the decision then was, do we rent it, do we not rent it, like how do we have friends move in, whatnot. So we decided to rent it, and ultimately went down a couple different paths. In the Mid-Atlantic, there's a huge military contingent, so we tried to go the military route, but for whatever reason with the different online services, we didn't have any luck. And then ultimately ended up on Zillow, and I was flooded.
You were bombarded, right?
Bombarded, like it was just nonstop.
Yeah.
So it got to the point where I was literally, if somebody was just inquiring with nothing that, they haven't written anything.
Right.
I started going through, and I'm going to be honest, I started going through like whose grammar's good,
Yeah.
who's like well spoken, what are they saying, and then I would call certain people, and then ultimately found a family that was great that was actually moving back to the East Coast from California.
Perfect.
So yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that must have been, like, once you got the house rented, now it's really like there's no turning back.
Yeah, there was no turning back.
We're gone.
Yeah. Well, and that was we were already gutting the house. We were already like,
right.
we we used it as an opportunity to get rid of clutter. Stuff that we've been hanging on to that we didn't need to. So we sold a lot of stuff. We took stuff to the dump, donated stuff.
It's a good side benefit.
Threw it out. Yeah, exactly.
Great. Okay, so the trip's about to begin.
Yep.
And I know your first stop was you were coming up to see us in Maine and do a lot of things there.
Yes.
But
the longest leg of our trip since then. That was
the largest drive.
That was the longest drive. Yeah,
wasn't that funny?
Single sitting drive.
Right. Oh, that's right. Because you were telling me like you try to stick to 5-6 hours of driving
max
during the day.
Max, yeah, during the day. With 3 to 4 hours was our sweet spot.
That's your sweet spot, right? So So you came all the way up to Maine on that first Okay, I've driven this around the block a couple times. Let's go and drive 12 hours.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So
in the night.
Right? Exactly. Just making it happen.
Yeah.
So I got to tell a story though about the start of this trip.
Yes.
Just because to me it's so hilarious.
Yes.
So we're waiting for them to come. Tracking them on the GPS. I know exactly where they are. We know they're right around the corner from us, and we're all on the front lawn ready to videotape it. And all of a sudden we see them pass our street in this giant RV with a car out the end of it. And then I'm like, oh no, he missed the street. And he turns down the one street you shouldn't turn down, a dead end.
Yes.
Because this was a good learning lesson for you.
It was great.
So you're on this dead end. What'd you have to do? You had to get out, get the car off of it.
Yes. Yeah. So we drove 14 hours total to get to you. It was 6 hours the night, the night before, and then 8 hours the next day. And we had one problem in the gas station where I kind of got myself into a pickle, as they say, a little pickle.
Right.
And I had to unhook the car and do some other stuff. So, but yeah, we make it to the finish line, and so turn down that street, detach the car. My wife jumps into that car, backs it out, and my 13-year-old is now navigating traffic. So he's out in the middle of the street, and it's not a super busy road, but he held off a couple of cars, and I had to back into a driveway and then kind of turn off, and that's when we made it back to you.
So funny.
It was very funny. Well, 3 kids were pushing a dead car out of the one street that Bayberry's on, and when I saw that street, for whatever reason, I thought it was your street.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? And then
so you're like, we'll loop around.
It just threw me off. Yeah.
He hit the one wrong street. It was hilarious.
Very funny.
But anyway, that was funny. So you spent the first couple weeks? I think you were with us.
We spent about 3 weeks in Maine. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that for a minute because. Our father lived up in the Bangor, Orono area, so we spent a couple weeks really kind of getting things going for you.
Yes.
In the Portland area, and then we made a great trip up to Orono and down east, and you guys did a bunch of cool stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was some of the highlights on that trip?
I mean, I went to University of Maine in Orono, years ago, and there were a couple things. So it was great to see the house that Dad lived in. Mm-hmm. It was great to see University of Maine in Orono campus.
Yeah.
And the highlight, as far as I was concerned, was going downtown in Orono.
Yeah.
And walking into Ampersand, the coffee shop. And the woman behind the counter, she looked familiar to me. I mean, it's been over 20 years.
Yeah.
And we started talking, and I mentioned about my father, and I think I even asked her if she knew him, and she said no. And then we started talking a little bit more, and I just mentioned, he was a contractor, and she goes, wait a minute, is it Doug?
Yeah.
Which would be Doug Sr.
So funny.
And she remembered him absolutely, and started telling stories about he and his girlfriend Marlene, and a whole bunch of different stuff that happened at that time. So that was a very, very awesome moment.
It was.
And one of the reasons why Grace and I wanted to do this trip was to have a whole bunch of epic stuff happen in 12 months. Right. And that was the beginning.
Yeah.
So.
And the thing that was so cool about that, you might not know, but our father passed back in the year 2000.
2000, yeah.
So, 19 years ago.
Years, yeah.
And this woman still remembered our dad.
Yes.
So that was really, really quite amazing.
That was very cool. Yeah.
So anyway, you bop around Maine for a couple weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and then time to head out. And you're gone. And now 7 months later, we meet up in Florida. So what's been going on the last 7 months? What's kind of the highlights here?
Okay, well, I'll break it down as quickly and as effectively as possible, right? So,
well, we could talk for 3 hours if you want.
Yeah, we can talk and talk. So, basically, when we left you, so first of all, the one part about Maine that I do want to say is that we went to Bar Harbor to go to Cadillac Mountain to see the sunrise, and it was completely foggy. We woke up at 5 in the morning or 3 in the morning to get there, and we're all standing there with 100 of other, imbeciles
Right.
just all
Waiting for the sun to
There's
come
no
up.
sun. I think it peaked through for like literally 5 seconds, then it was over.
Yeah.
So we went straight down to Salem, Mass. So we had a reserved campsite down there, and that was the first campsite we reserved, and we did it from Maryland before we even came to Maine.
Yeah.
And Grace and I, when we reserved that campsite, we were like, stressed about the move. Scheduled the campsite and went like we freaked out because like we're finally actually doing the trip, right? So So we stayed there. It was in Winter, I think it was called Winter Island, right on the water, and we got to visit a number of really great friends. So and we got to go to like a witch museum and do some other cool stuff that was in Salem. And then we drove into Boston, but there was something up with our refrigerator. We couldn't get our refrigerator working.
Oh, right.
So we dropped it off in an RV place out in Worcester, which is west of the city, but we stayed with friends Sonny and Jocelyn and their boys in Jamaica Plain, and then used their house as a home base to kind of go all over Beacon Hill and Faneuil Hall and Quincy Market and
sure.
all
Kind
of
of
that
do the
stuff.
Boston tour.
Do the Boston thing. We went all over the place in Boston. So ultimately we ended up in Scituate after that. We did Labor Day in Scituate because we did the parade down there, and that was a lot of fun. And we stayed with Alice and Paul and their kids down in Scituate. And we stopped by Gillette Stadium in Patriotsville, so we stayed close there at a great campsite. Stopped off in Rhode Island, stopped off and saw one of my father's best childhood friends, Roger, in Nassau, New York, outside of Albany.
Right.
So we stopped by to see him. Went to Niagara Falls, walked over the bridge to Canada, and walked back.
That's awesome.
Did a bunch of stuff in Buffalo, which was a lot of fun.
And that's our old stomping grounds. That's where we're from.
That's
so
where we grew up, yeah. And then Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Cleveland. That's where we kind of hung out in Ohio. Went right through Indiana, got into Illinois, went to Chicago. Was supposed to go to a wedding in France, and that fell through. As you know, we don't need to get into those details. It broke our hearts. It broke our hearts. So, but we ended up going to Rockford, Illinois, into an amazing Japanese garden. Then we went to Wisconsin. Just bopped around in Wisconsin a bunch, and that was great because we were in some summer places that, because it's not summer, we had the run of the land. Like there's no lines for anything like that. It was. All the places were still kind of open because it was September.
Right.
So that was good. And then Minnesota with Kathy and Joe and their kids, and that was wonderful. We got to hang out with them for about a week and went to see Prince's, Paisley Park.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That was amazing. And bopped around a bunch of different stuff there, too, a couple museums. And then ultimately we wanted to go to the northern part of the country, the Badlands, Mount Rushmore, that kind of stuff, but all the temperatures started dropping into the teens.
Right.
And I was such a newbie, I was afraid.
You don't want to be dealing with that.
Oh, we're going to freeze our pipes, like especially living up in Maine. You know, I used to live up in Maine years ago, so I knew about, the effects of cold. So we started heading south to like Iowa and Nebraska, and then those temperatures started dropping, so I was like, well, I got to get out of here completely.
Yeah, you just got to go.
And went straight down to Oklahoma.
Nice, yeah.
And hung out there for a little bit, and then went through Kansas, stopped by and saw Adam and Lindsay there, and Adam cooked some mean tomahawk steaks.
Nice.
He was like, I'm going to cook you some great Kansas beef.
Nice. And
then we went to Colorado and did a whole bunch of stuff there. That was amazing. The mountains, Colorado Springs, just unbelievable.
Some of that, like video footage and pictures that you sent us, were just awesome.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's completely insane.
Yeah.
And then we wanted to go to Utah. There's very good friends of Grace's and now mine that live in Utah. So we went up through Wyoming to make it through the Rockies the best way without being on some like little tiny road with this huge bus.
I think I can.
Yeah, exactly. I was terrified of that. So we went through Wyoming, which was windy. So if anybody knows Wyoming, you know it's windy. Salt Lake City, Spanish Fork, Utah. Then we ultimately went to Vegas.
Yeah.
And then Vegas, we went to Santa Ana to visit family. My brother-in-law lives there with his family.
And you spent a lot of time there.
California,
or at least around in California.
Yeah,
right?
California was similar to New England. I mean, New England we spent about 4 weeks total. Between Maine and everything else. California was about 6 weeks. We made it through Joshua Tree. We made it through Death Valley. We wanted to go to Yosemite, and it just got too cold.
Right.
Like it was awful. So then we went Napa Valley, San Francisco, and then kind of went down the Pacific Coast. But on 101, not Route 1, because Route 1 is like super narrow roads and right on the coast the whole way.
Yeah, gotcha.
101 kind of meets with 1. but we got to see some different parts of California. But Santa Barbara was beautiful, Hearst Castle,
Right.
L.A., like going through Beverly Hills and stuff.
So,
That was cool.
so when you went to Bob's, that was right around. Was that right around Christmas season?
Yep. So we showed up for
So
for
basically, it
Thanksgiving.
took you from August to the end of the year. You know,
Into
4 or
California,
5
yeah.
months to get way over. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we took chunks of time to, like, we were in Minnesota, you know, for a week. We didn't necessarily plan on doing that, but
Right.
because we had such good friends there, we were spending time with
Yeah.
them, and it was great.
Yeah. Why not? Right.
Yeah, it was great. So, right. So January 9th, we left California.
And started to work your way, ultimately to get here.
Yes,
But you
ultimately
had,
get
you
here.
had a few cool stops on the way.
Yeah, so we went to Arizona. We got to stop in Tucson and then ultimately Tombstone. And I have 2 sons that are 11 and 13, so they
I'm
went
a Huckleberry.
kooky. Yeah, they went nuts for Tombstone. Watched the movie after they saw the town, so it was very, very cool.
That's awesome.
And they've been completely hooked in it. So
Yeah.
and then ultimately went through Arizona, New Mexico, zigzagged through Texas, and saw a lot of folks that we know, some really great people. And then we ultimately made it to New Orleans.
Right.
Because I was asked to marry friends of mine before we started the trip.
Right.
And before we started the trip, my first instant response was no. I cannot do that.
Cannot do that. I'm on a trip.
I can't even wrap my head around this trip, much less, being the officiant for a wedding.
Right.
And I'm not a pastor or a minister or anything like that, but I said, you know what? No. Yes, I'm going to do this because this will make the trip even more epic and it'll be a great privilege. And my God, was it? It was just such an honor.
I bet.
To do it.
Now, did you have to get like a certificate or anything like that?
Well, no. Specifically, the reason being is that the couple was already legally married. So they got married the year before to adopt their baby.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so they wanted to do the ceremony basically as a ceremony, for their friends and family.
All right, gotcha.
So I could have been a duck.
Could have been anyone. With a top hat on.
Exactly. I could have been a stick figure on a piece of paper
right. Okay.
hanging off the mic stand.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So then from there, once you left New Orleans, it was basically just working your way down here, right?
Yep. So we zigzagged our way down here, just a couple of stops, and by the time we were in Florida, I think we were in Florida the second day, and because we were so close to Mom and knowing you guys were coming into town, it was like, why dilly-dally? And then we just shot our way over.
And the cool thing about how we hooked up down here, like we flew into Orlando to come down here.
Yeah.
And the day that we spent a day in Orlando with the kids and all that stuff, then packed them up and headed out at our hotel around noon or whatever. Started to drive down here. It's about 2.5, 3 hours from here. And I get a call from him. He's like, "Where are you?" I was like, "I'm on, I forget, 93 or whatever."
91.
Yeah, 91. And he's like, "Oh, I'm on 91." So we were literally like, what, like 20 miles away from each other.
Mile markers.
And so I'm like, "Well, hey, I'm just going to slow down a little bit." And we ended up hooking up in a rest area.
Yep.
And we were able to. I jumped in the RV with him and all that stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
And then of course you let me buy it. Or let me drive it.
Drive it. Drive it. Yeah.
So. So I guess to finish up, what's the story from here on out? You guys got any more plans, or I think you got, as far as I know, you guys pretty much just going to wing it from here, right?
Yeah, we don't have any set plans at all. We figured we'd spend the month of March in Florida, so we're just going to zigzag to different points around Florida. Other than that, so like April, May, June, July, we're looking at April meeting up with great friends of ours, Jennifer and Ethan and their boys up in Maryland, that we're actually talking about meeting together somewhere maybe in the Carolinas for spring break.
Oh, fun.
But we still got to work out plans with that. But we want to go up to the Northwest, which means we're going to have to go all the way up to the other side of the country again, because we'll catch it during the summer, which will be a much better time. But we're not exactly sure what our itinerary would be. So, but that's one of the yeah, we're not planners.
Right.
That's the thing. Yeah, we just go. We make stuff happen. We've planned this whole trip and we've executed the trip and we've done. But we're not sticklers to a plan. So we do like kind of the spontaneous adventures. So whatever it'll be fun. We'll have fun doing it. So
it'll be good. Now, you mentioned, I guess to finish up, you mentioned to me the other day that there's a lot of like Facebook groups and stuff like that out there that's been able to give you guys like support and all that stuff. How valuable has that been on this trip?
I can't even, if anybody from any of those groups watches this video, I cannot thank the people, the members enough, because it's gotten to the point now where if I have a question about anything with the RV, if I take a picture, I'll take a video, I'll put a description, I'll say, what's your wisdom? And I'll get like 100 responses.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And then it's a matter of going, well, 75 of these responses are all the same.
They're saying this, so let's go with that.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that. So,
Yeah.
but I've learned, like, it's saved me so much anxiety, and just knowing that it's there.
Right.
Like, if I run into something crazy, all I have to do is have enough consciousness to go, let me just post something real quick, and then check back an hour later, and I'll have a ton of answers.
Right.
So,
What do you think the most challenging thing was so far?
with the RV or the trip? With the trip?
Yeah, either way.
It's challenging not to have a stable. I mean, the RV, inside the RV, when we're inside of it, that's our home. But we don't have stability the way that you do with a house. You know,
Right.
you know what I mean? So the most challenging thing is there's no solid ground. Basically, that's what it feels like. You're kind of just like floating around, blowing around, and you just have to make your solid ground, wherever. So
Right.
things that might have made me a little bit anxious, like even living in the house or living at home, I've just had to kind of basically get over it.
Deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like,
just be like,
not much you can do about it.
yeah, I gotta, so in a lot of ways, it's taught all of us to calm down. Like, it's taught all of us to slow down, calm down,
Right.
think things through, and it's great for the boys, but they don't have any of their friends.
Yeah.
And that hurts my heart, you know what I mean? 'Cause
Right.
I know it hurts their heart, kind of thing. So, but
Yeah.
other than that, they appreciate the trip. We do.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, with all the groups out there, and at least being able to reach out to us, I mean, you're not out there alone.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
well, great, man. This was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good times, man.
So, if you guys want to do an RV trip with all these Facebook groups and all that stuff, you don't have to do it alone. And if you want to make Maine your home, you don't have to do it alone. See you guys.